we had this convoluted finish cooked up, and in the end, the dominant champion still won, and it left a bad taste in everybody's mouth. God, that's unfortunate. But enough about Melbourne. Welcome to our WrestleMania review here on Motorsport 101.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 431 of Motorsport 101. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Dre Harrison. And Formula One was back on the docket again for round 3 of its championship at the Australian Grand Prix at Melbourne. I do like the Australian Grand Prix. I do like Melbourne. It's a round I do normally like very much. Oh, boy. We got ourselves a good old-fashioned shit show, everybody. We'll talk about this a little bit more during the actual main event segment itself, but if there was any further evidence needed about the direction the sport is going in terms of race management, I present to you Exhibit D, Your Honor, because this was a wild one, a historic race in F1 history. I'll tell you the stats as to why it's a historic race later on, but the Aussie Grand Prix was won by Max Verstappen. And that was the least interesting part about that win. I could barely speak for a second there. But with me, to break it down as ever, we have Mr. Cam Buckley. Hello, sir.
Hi, everyone. I just want to know what was going through everyone's mind when they thought, all the constant whining on social media about stewarding, all of the hashtags that same 15 set of accounts they keep going through.
Oh, yeah.
They decided that how they were going to fix it was to pull a page out of NASCAR's book. Oh, God.
I'm not entirely sure that was going to help appease anybody's thoughts and vibes on anything at the moment because, this was a lot. RJ, your initial thoughts as it was all going down?
Thank you for having me on. Like any pro wrestling podcaster, I crib all my thoughts and opinions from Brian Alvarez and Dave Meltzer. No, it's a serious question. And I know I'm like one of the few people that was like, I didn't mind Roman Reigns in the era where he was just like the worst thing in professional wrestling for a hot minute. But like, and I know Cody Rhodes is cool, and I respect the hell out of what he did to go independent, eventually help start his own company that is now WWE's main competitor. But, like, y'all cannot be this down bad for him. Like, yeah, it's a bad booking decision that he didn't. But like, I would have much preferred Sami Zayn in that spot in the main event on Sunday, if I'm honest. And I love the fact that he and Kevin Owens won the tag titles on Saturday. That was so fucking cool.
My general vibe as a part-time wrestling fan, mostly because of my brother, who is still a full-time wrestling fan, and I had to hear about that finish at 4 a.m. on Monday morning because Ryan was staying up watching WrestleMania. I'm not happy about this, Ryan, by the way, if you're listening, you little shit. But what I will say is that if you weren't going to drop it to Sami Zayn in Montreal, which was genuinely hyped as all hell, and you weren't going to drop it to Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania, which is normally your big storyline reset for something like WrestleMania, when is Roman Reigns going to drop this damn thing? And to who? This felt like a natural conclusion for the bloodline. The Usos lost, and then Reigns goes and wins anyway. I find it very strange that that's the way they wanted to book that storyline. Personally,
but hey, everything's going to be better because TRT replacement therapy. Clark Gable is back. That's right. Vince is back in charge.
Oh,
Dude, this shameless motherfucker with his fucking mustache.
His fucking porn star from the 80s style mustache, and the fact that now they're going to be under the same umbrella as the UFC, which felt inevitable, by the way, because I've said it for a while. Dana White is the greatest pro wrestling promoter of all time. And the amount that they were basically doing handshake deals with the UFC at certain points over people like Brock Lesnar anyway. So, like, it kind of feels natural that they're all going to be under the Endeavor umbrella. But fuck me, Vince back is just so deflating, honestly. Almost as deflating as the end of how this race felt.
Yeah, because at the end, when is Max Verstappen going to drop the belt?
Good question. I'll get back to you on that one. We'll get into some of that race. We'll get into whether Red Bull can actually run the table. We'll get into some beef, or should it be? It's a little bit of beef. It's like a slider of beef between Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso.
It's going to be a White Castle order, but not like Harold and Kumar's.
Oh no! That Munchies order is legendary. And of course, we'll also talk about some underdogs because this was a bit of a chaotic race down the bottom of the field. More on that in a bit. Places you can find us real quick before we get into the meat and potatoes of the action. You can find us on Twitter at motorsport_101. Our personal handles are at RJ O'Connell, at CBuckley917, and me at Dre_WTF1. You know it, you love it. Also, again, you check out our website, motorsport101.com. I've been a very busy man, pumping up race reviews for all of the weekend's action. Formula One on this very race. If you want some extended thoughts from me, they'll be on there. And I've got a monthly column coming out on WTF1 regarding that as well. They've given me the keys to a monthly column. So look forward to Dre, as I like to nickname it. The acronym stands for Dre's Regular Editorial. See what I did there? Clever. So more on that soon as well. MotoGP on the Grand Prix in Argentina went up literally the night of we're recording this. Very proud of that one, actually. That was a one of the longest ones I've ever done on MotoGP, funnily enough. That was a lot to get into from that chaotic weekend. More on that in our next show coming up as well. And IndyCar in Texas, which, maybe the first 10 out of 10 race this season. We'll see how that plays out when I'm writing it up tomorrow. So check all of those out very, very soon. And if you like us that much, you can back us financially on Patreon. Patreon.com/motorsport101. $5 gets you early access to all of our shows before they go live to the public. $10 gets you all of that, and support us club our Discord server where you can listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded. I can hold no longer. Let's get into the Australian Grand Prix.
The record book will show Max Verstappen won his 37th Formula One Grand Prix under a safety car. How we got there was anything but straightforward. Max was dominating the race comfortably until the second red flag of the race landed when Kevin Magnussen hit the outside of the turn 2 wall and his tire fell off. You're wondering, second red flag of the race? The first one happened when Alexander Albon crashed out of the top 10 that he had qualified and raced his way into on merit. That scattered out some barriers and gravel onto the racetrack, and they decided to throw the red flag at the race. George Russell, who was leading at the time of this red flag, had just come into the pits. And that elevated Verstappen into a position where it could easily pass Lewis Hamilton to retake the lead of the race. But we have a second red flag, and then we get a standing restart. And on that restart, we get 3 separate clashes. First, Carlos Sainz spitting out Fernando Alonso while he was running third. At the back of the grid, Logan Sargeant, the Floridaman, punting Nyck De Vries off the road. And then, just as it cleared turn 2, Pierre Gasly drifted off into his teammate Esteban Ocon, and they crashed into the concrete barrier. An immediate red flag was called, the third one of the race. And after half of an hour of deliberating the running order, the race was finished under safety car, with Max Verstappen winning from Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso on the podium in third. Lots to unpack here.
You seem to have forgotten that Lance Stroll had one of the best crash avoidances I think I've seen in the last couple years, avoiding the Alpine crash, and apparently was so impressed and surprised with himself that he forgot to brake for turn 3 and went flying off the road.
It's like, oh wow, I got out of that one. How did I do that? Oh shit!
God. I can tell you what I thought of the finish of this race. But I want to hear it from you, Dre. What'd you make of this finish? Are you digging what Formula One's trying to do here as it blends more entertainment into its finish? I mean, we just got done talking about a series which has kind of sports entertainment baked into it.
Yeah, sorry about that. My headphones popped off my head for a second there, in shock of what RJ just said. No, I was going to say, I mean, this was a historic race. This was the first F1 race ever to have 3 red flags in it.
Yeah!
We did it for Dale? Question mark.
I know, like, I had to actually look this up. There is a Wikipedia list of all the red flags ever dropped in F1. There's a handful with 2. And even 2 red flags in a race is a rare race. This is a true unicorn. We've never had a 3 red flag race in F1 history. And I find it ironic that in a race where Niels Wittich, the race director, was blatantly trying to add some artificial spice, because the first red flag with Albon, I could understand that one. There was gravel across the entire width of the track. That I can get. That I can understand. That
killed any organic excitement that this.
Oh god, yeah.
Because Russell and Hamilton had gotten a great start. They were running first and second, and they probably just threw away the strategy. But ultimately, it wouldn't have mattered because George Russell's power unit decided to go pop, pop, fizz, fizz. Oh, what a relief it isn't.
Yeah, it was
Kerbal Wallenlager,
a classic. The classic. It was England's 2021 Ashes colorized. But basically, that one I can understand. The Kevin Magnussen crash is not a red flag in a month of Sundays. No chance. The tyre was right by an escape road, and Marshall has to literally extend his arm and he probably gets to that tyre. And K-Mag had parked his car right by one of the escape roads as well. That is never a red flag in a month of Sundays. It was blatantly a move done by Wittich to try and get a dramatic finish. This was straight IndyCar. And I find it ironic that despite the fact we had 3 red flags, despite the fact we had complete chaos and half an hour of deliberation as the FIA tried to work out, can we finish this? Do we need to finish this race under a safety car? Can we just call it now?
How many laps did we actually complete?
It took us an hour to get through the last 7 laps of this race. So from K-Mag's crash to the actual checker took an hour. It was a 2.5 hour Grand Prix. Because the red flag time doesn't count towards the overall 2-hour clock anymore. But it was a 2.5 hour Grand Prix. It took an hour to complete the last 7 laps. And for all of that, the race finished under a safety car anyway.
After another red flag, because obviously with nearly 4 separate major incidents, major offs, obviously they had to throw another red flag. I mean, 4 of those cars were beached.
Yeah. Like, De Vries and Sargeant were out. Obviously, Ocon and Gasly had crunched. And then Alonso had to spin his car back around again. By the time it was all said, they had to throw another red. That third red was, again, understandable. But, by that point, you've literally run out of racing laps, because that was the penultimate lap anyway. So, by the time you bunch the cars up again, you only go back a lap in F1 if the race cannot be restarted. So, as a direct result of that, they ran out of laps, so they had to finish it under a safety car, and that was it. And Verstappen won under a safety car finish, which, by the way, I did some digging on this, because I was like, is this really a huge problem? And I did some digging. Well, since the safety car procedure that we know today was invented back in 1993, we have had 550 Grand Prix in that time. Literally, this was the 550th Grand Prix since 1993 started. The amount of races that have finished under a safety car in that time, drum roll please. Wait for it.
I'm not at a desk where I can drum roll.
11.
It's not that many.
11 out of 550. For those quick on the maths, you'll be able to quickly work out, if you can simplify fractions, that is a 1 in 50 rate. Is this really an issue, F1? Really?
Clearly it is.
And the funny thing is, we've had 2 in the last year, because this is how It's this is how Monza last year finished with Daniel Ricciardo's stricken car. We finished under yellow, and that was probably partly because Burt Maylander forgot forgot that Verstappen was race leader and not George Russell, and they ran out of laps trying to pick up the leader. So they didn't have a choice to red flag it, and then the FIA had to release a statement at the end of that race saying this is why we didn't pull out a red flag, and now we are deliberately throwing red flags out there to try and construct an artificial finish. I don't inherently hate this, right? Like, I think there is, look, Cam.
Yeah.
Like, I thought you wanted to interrupt me for a second. Sorry about that. I was going to say is that I don't think this is inherently a bad thing, right? I can understand, to a degree, why you'd want to finish a race under green. IndyCar's been doing it for years, and generally speaking, more often than not, it's fine. I don't have a major problem with it. But it does kind of breed a debate of, you tried this, and it blatantly didn't work. And I find it ironic to me, and I'll end my point on this. The red flag in motorsport is designed as the ultimate safety tool. It is designed to stop a race that is too dangerous to continue. Right?
Correct.
It doesn't sit right with me that this flag is now being used as a weapon to try and make a race more entertaining, ironically, by the standing restart rule, which you've had now for about half a decade in form. I can't remember the exact year it came. I want to say it was 2017 that they've brought in standing restarts, which, by the way, is the most dangerous thing about Formula One. There is nothing more dangerous about this sport than the standing restart, and it was purely brought in for entertainment purposes.
Yeah.
So we're stopping races with a red flag that are clearly too dangerous to continue, in your opinion, to replace it with a standing restart, which is inherently more dangerous. What are we doing here?
We are making desperation plays to try and add some excitement to a season that at the front is probably not going to be all that exciting.
Yeah, let's be real. Verstappen had no problem getting past Lewis Hamilton. And
we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. But yeah, I mean, to kind of reiterate Dre's points, that the first red flag, I can understand. It was borderline, but I don't have a problem with them throwing it. You don't want cars tracking more gravel further down the road. It's going to take longer to clean up. But that second red flag just reeked of, oh God, someone please spice this up for us. I've been visited by Nigel.
Nigel was just like, oh God, he can't win another one of these. He's going to win enough of them already.
I must interfere.
Yeah. Anyway. I've lost my train of thought. Thanks, Nigel.
So the first red flag was
the second
necessary, borderline.
The second red flag, and the differences in U.S. motorsport, or specifically in IndyCar, we do not get standings restarts.
No, at all.
So we've never been. Yeah, they're straight up not a thing. NASCAR doesn't have standing restarts because this basically amounted to a green-white checker scenario. If you're familiar with NASCAR. And desperate times call for desperate measures when half the grid are down bad for some points. Ferrari are down bad for a podium at all because they are a disgrace this season. Worst start to a season under this point system.
Since 2010. They're doing even worse than their 2014 vacuum cleaner car was.
They're doing worse than 2020, Dre. And in the second race of that one, Charles ass-packed Sebastian Vettel at turn 2.
Hey, yo.
Straight up landed on him. So, and I feel like there is a general lack of respect that seems to be permeating across all of top-tier professional motorsports right now, where I feel like the driving standards are kind of going out the window in all of them. And that last restart or the last proper restart, was just that bottled up into one corner complex. Carlos Sainz speared Fernando Alonso.
Like his name was Gwyneth Paltrow, allegedly.
Oh my. Logan Sargeant just didn't brake for turn one. Blew Nyck De Vries up, as if Nyck De Vries' weekend wasn't already bad enough.
Oof.
He is looking extra strugglicious at this stage of the season. And the Alpine, well...
Pierre Gasly is very, very lucky he's not facing a race ban next time out.
That's the other thing I want to dive into, is that out of all of this, we have three very different decisions on how to handle these incidents. Carlos Sainz gets dropped from third to out of the points entirely because, to be fair, he absolutely did take Fernando Alonso out. We're not debating that. But then I guess the stewards made a business decision and said it is a bad look if Alpine does not have one of its star drivers for any indeterminate amount of time. And that's why they decided we're not giving Pierre Gasly any penalty points. We're going to take them at their word and say this is just a clumsy racing incident where nobody's at fault. And then with Logan Sargeant, because that's at the back of the grid, they didn't even pay attention to that. Nothing investigated.
Don't tell me that they penalize on action rather than outcome when Gasly didn't get a penalty for that crash.
Right.
Because that penalty that was not given would have pushed him into a race ban.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. For those who are missing a little bit of context, because every show is somebody's first, Pierre Gasly was on 10 penalty points going into this race.
He went on 8. He gets a ban at 10.
It's 12 and he's on 10.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I know he was 2 away, but it just felt like this was a business decision. Like, we can't have them throwing out Jack Doohan and Baku.
No, like like I said, Gasly was on 10. 12 gets you a race ban. General rule of thumb: a driver error on track gets you 2 penalty points. It depends on the severity of the incident. It's normally between 1 and 3. That would definitely have been a 2 because that was a huge crash between them.
He just rejoined and just didn't check his mirror. I mean, to an extent, he had nowhere else to go.
Yeah,
but
they can't do that, man.
You can't be doing that.
No,
and again, it reeked of please someone else win this race, which is of course why that is the only restart of the 3 that we got that Max absolutely aced.
Yep, just barely in his grid box for what it was worth. A lot of people
he was pushing his luck.
He was very close. He was very close. He was legal. There is a transponder device in the car and a sensor on the grid box. If he was out of his box, we'd know about it very quickly.
They just made the boxes wider.
Yeah.
But it's not so much that. It wasn't like left to right, they made it wider. They increased the width of the box.
20 centimeters. Yeah.
The question was whether he was too far forward. As long as your front tires are touching the white line, you're kosher. You're good.
Yeah, you're fine. To clarify that, and just to clarify as well, it's a rolling 12-month system on the super license points. Gasly doesn't start dropping them until the middle of May, so
he's got a couple more races to go without doing any more stupid shit.
He's got to go through Baku and Miami back to back after this.
He has to go through the Baku sprint.
Yeah, which everyone loves, by the way, and they're really popular about it. But yeah, I had to explain to one of our mates on our Discord server about this, and I said, look, generally speaking, if it's a teammate-related crash, the stewards tend to wave them off. I don't understand why this is. Because I remember when Leclerc and Vettel hit each other at Ferrari in Brazil, and there was no punishment dished out for either driver. They just tend to wave them off.
And just like you've already embarrassed yourself enough as it is. We don't want to put penalty points on top of you for that.
Right.
Yeah. Same deal with like Nico and Lewis in the good old days.
Ricciardo and Verstappen. Yeah. Baku.
Oh, God.
Yeah, the French kiss.
Oh my.
But generally speaking, if it's a teammate incident, they wave them off. That's been a consistent approach from the stewards. I don't necessarily agree with it, but all I will say is that Gasly is a very, very lucky boy in that sense. Because if he hits any other car instead of his own teammate, he's banned for Baku, and it's Jack Doohan making his F1 debut in 3 weeks' time. So
Baku sprint.
At the Baku sprint. Good luck to him on that one. But my overall vibe on this is that this is not a new event. Formula One's been leaning this way for a couple of years now. If you remember Baku in 2021, we had a 2-lap standing restart when Formula One could have easily just finished that race under safety car. They could have even red flagged and called it. I don't think anybody would have complained, although Max would have been allowed to keep his win. So I'm not sure how well that would have gone down. But they chose to do a 2-lap standing restart. There was some knockback regarding that, but ultimately it led to a Vettel-Gasly podium, which I think a lot of people were too busy jumping up and down over that to really be critical of the finish. We saw it in Belgium later that year when Michael Masi used force majeure to try and break the 4-hour rule in desperation to get a timed race off. And we all know how Abu Dhabi finished. And even Monza last year, they had an option. They could have red flagged it. They chose not to. And people butted their heads over it, whether it... I think there was a determinant clash between people that wanted the rules to be followed or a red flag to come out. And I think part of that was because Verstappen had dominated that race anyway, and it was one more shot for him to potentially lose off a bad restart or some shit like that. And of course, the urge of, Abu Dhabi still ringing in the ears and wanting the race to be followed to the letter of the law.
Don't you know that the red flag in this race is what a race director with actual values and integrity would have done? And oh no, it's all gone horribly wrong. Forget what I said.
Well, here's the thing, and I will die on this hill forever, that for those of you, and you know who you are, you know what hashtags you write every 2 hours on your Twitter pages. There is only one thing that F1 ruled towards in 2021 and since. Wasn't Lewis.
Nope.
Certainly wasn't Max.
Absolutely not.
Wasn't Jonathan Wheatley on the radio.
Definitely not.
Or Toto Wolff. It was the show.
The show.
This gave us a show. It gave us an hour-long crash cleanup, multiple red flags, and a general bad taste in everyone's mouth.
I stayed up till 3:30 to watch this. I want my time back. Look, I'll say this.
We stayed up so late on the East Coast. It was so bad.
Yeah. Trey, you were lucky. You just had to be up early for this. We got to stay late for this crap.
I had to tell Josh Ravel, who I was doing my WETF1 live show with directly after, like, Josh, do you mind sticking around for another half hour? And we planned it. Well, we plan our Sunday shows. This is a bit of a behind-the-scenes WTF1 perspective for you, for those guys who listen to us from across both channels. We plan the race review to be 2.5 hours after the race starts. It covers the 2-hour time limit plus half an hour. Like,
oh, no.
Like, we were on the nose because the Australian Grand Prix was 2 hours, 31 minutes from start to finish.
Like a glove.
Like, I called that one perfectly, and we still had to knock it back half an hour because we deliberately leave it an extra 30 minutes in case any news drops after the race. Like in, for example, Jeddah only a month ago, where Fernando Alonso had an extra time penalty added and then taken away again. We actually were able to cover ourselves because we'd put it off for an extra 30 minutes. This was a lot. And yeah, like Cam alluded to, I completely agree with him. This is F1 trying to use the rule book to enhance the show. And I'm not sure how I feel about this because Formula One is trying very hard to improve the show. That's why the sprint exists. The whole idea of the sprint was that they felt like some race fans didn't have the attention span for a 90-minute race. So they thought, let's cut it down to a 1/3 distance sprint. They've now used the red flag a lot more frequently than they did 2 years ago or 3 years ago to try and stop these races and get a finish under green, which, don't get me wrong, the teams also all agreed to. The teams told Michael Masi when he was race director, we'd prefer a finish under green. But that's another one of these bullshit handshake agreements we've been talking about.
No more. Trey, please, no more handshake agreements. Every series, every time I'm sick of talking about rules. I want to talk about cars going zoom. And every fucking episode of Motorsport 101 is us embroiled in regulation talk because as soon as you go beyond the letter of the law and you start operating in the gray area, anytime that rule comes under duress by a situation, it falls apart.
Yeah, because the moment it's a
You're going to
gentleman,
leave a bad taste in someone's mouth.
it's a gentleman's agreement until someone doesn't want to be a gentleman anymore.
That you just summed up motorsport in a single sentence, Andre Harrison.
Thank you very much. I'll collect my paycheck now. I'm here all week. Try the veal, because that's how I feel about it.
It's the best in town. This is also kind of like, and I don't want to be like, oh, American influence is ruining Formula One, but this is very much an American thing. A safety car finish is an extension of an American sporting cliche where a tie is like kissing your sister. The NFL is the only one of the big four sports leagues that allows for tie games, draw matches, and that's only in the regular season. Baseball doesn't do it. Basketball doesn't do it. Hockey abolished it after the lockout. I remember there were riots when the MLB All-Star Game finished in a tie. I remember when fans at Talladega Superspeedway pelted Jeff Gordon's car with beer cans after he had the audacity, the nerve, the sheer temerity to win a race behind the pace car. And also because he wasn't Dale Earnhardt's son. And not long after, that's how we had green-white checkered, aka overtime, being brought from the truck series and grassroots oval racing into the Cup series. IndyCar doesn't do overtime, but they aren't above throwing a late red flag in races, even the Indianapolis 500, to try and ensure a competitive finish, especially lately.
Yeah, but, I mean, RJ, the IndyCar race that we are going to cover tomorrow at time of recording, that finished under safety car.
That's right, but it was such a good race that, like, really, who's going to complain about that? And to that point, a lot like NASCAR's recent visit to Circuit of the Americas, where the final 11 laps took over an hour and a half to complete, and they also had to add 7 laps because of all the overtime attempts. That was an example of just how, like, trying to ensure a green flag finish can actually take away as many amazing outcomes as it would under a safety car. Because, Dre, what's the most famous result in a single NASCAR race that you can think of?
Probably Dale finally winning the Daytona 500, and that was under a safety. Oh.
Yep. That was
race back to the flag.
A race back to the yellow and the white, not the checkered flag.
Yep.
Could you imagine if Dale Earnhardt blew it on a final green-white checkered restart? On the Daytona 500.
Oh, dear God.
Yeah, I mean,
we're obsessed with it, and I think we're now starting to finally kind of push back a little and say, like, you know, actually, maybe it's not all that bad if we have tie games in the NHL. Maybe it's not all that bad if we finish a NASCAR race under safety car instead of this crap.
Well, guys, here's the thing. Do you want to try and you're trying to find the balance between getting an exciting finish and validating the rest of the race?
Yeah. Thank goodness
and in this case,
Tyler Reddick won that race at Coda on every restart, because, like, damn.
Because what you end up doing in scenarios like this is oftentimes in trying to validate the finish, you end up invalidating the entirety of the rest of the however long the distance was that you already ran.
It's a lot like a cycling race where someone breaks out from the peloton 2 kilometers from the end. It's like it's all like Moto 3, where, like, let's be honest, the first 90% of a race doesn't matter. It often boils down to the final 2 laps, and that's it. It feels arbitrary to a degree, and I don't like the way it's going, and I don't like the fact that safety rules are being manipulated to try and enhance the show, which ultimately ended up with a more dangerous situation anyway. Everybody looked stupid. A poor fan actually got hurt on that K-Mag crash as well. A piece of debris went over the catch fence and hit him in the arm. Poor guy.
Honest to God, out of control track invasion after the race. And not like a fun track invasion, but just like, oh shit, these people are about to touch a car that has a live hybrid system.
Yeah, the car was unsafe when Hulkenberg had to jump out of it. He had to do an ERS jump because his car was not safe when they had to park it up and stop the car. And there were fans on the track within a minute of that race finishing.
You know, we haven't even gotten into the fact that after the total clusterfuck of the 4 separate offs, we had a completely different finishing order to the one that we actually got.
Yeah, we got the chaos in the end. And it didn't even count.
Yeah, and then the lap was effectively revoked, unless you were Carlos Sainz, because, well, he still speared someone in the side pod.
Yeah.
The fact that the lap didn't count doesn't absolve him of driving into someone. But we were so close. We had the Nico Hulkenberg podium in our hands.
He was 4th after that second red flag, and with the penalty with Sainz in front of him, he would have finished 3rd.
He would have finished 3rd, and they ended up rolling the results back to basically pre-red flag, except for all the cars that were crashed out, of course.
Yeah.
And that is a judgment call where there is no real precedent for the FIA to go back on.
Yeah, because
it really is just kind of at their discretion whether they want to retain the post-restart or pre-restart finishing order.
Yeah, quick explainer, because again, it's a complicated rule. There was no timing loop that could be used to determine the order of the field because the race was effectively done after that turn 1 crash. So, like, there's a bunch of timing loops on any F1 track we go to. We didn't pass one of them before the red flag was called. The whole field's got to go through it as well for it to count, because you've got to determine the full order. Otherwise, what are we even bothering with?
Yeah, because
it has to try to protest the result, saying, oh, well, you could have used the second safety car line. And then the FAA was like, well, you can't really, because other drivers tried to gain that line, like with Pierre Gasly locking up and then ending up on the grass after the fact. So the FAA was like, we're not going to use that line because we think people will take advantage of it. So the only reference point was the previous restart.
Yeah.
That's all they had, basically.
Which means that lap didn't happen unless you are an Alpine driver or Nyck De Vries or Logan Sargeant or Carlos Sainz. Sorry.
Whoops.
Like, they did, like, usually the precedent has been just like, I don't know, but I'll rehash what I said in a roundtable discussion at racefans.net. This was far from the worst event that I've ever witnessed as a fan of Formula One in my lifetime. No competitor or marshal was gravely injured or worse. We had an injured spectator, but it looks like they'll be able to pull through. It was not 2 laps of parading in a never-ending monsoon just to try and say we did a race. My family did not have to pay hundreds, if not thousands of miles to drive to Indianapolis to watch what ended up being a glorified Bridgestone 6-car tire test for 2 hours. It was not that bad, but it wasn't good either.
No.
Wasn't good either. And Kevin Magnussen, stop embarrassing yourself.
That was a horrible crash. And
that
amazingly,
was one of the... Dre, how was it turned? How? I've crashed in many places on many video games. I have never done that.
I've never hit the outside wall of turn 2 at Albert Park. That is a unicorn. And you know what's the crazy thing about it? It's probably not even in the top 3 of most embarrassing crashes of the weekend if you were watching the juniors like this weekend.
Roy Nissany did the same thing, except further down the straight. He just crashed in a straight line, putting 2 wheels on the grass.
And then Enzo Fittipaldi spun coming out of pit lane and then wrecked his car and then tried to drive away from the wreckage and then ended up steering into the wall. Good God. Good God. What a weekend. And I don't mean that in no good way either.
But we fixed it all because Michael Massey is only a guest helping out the Supercars Championship, which, by the way, you couldn't watch if you were outside of Australia because of the Formula One broadcast rights and the way that they were for this weekend.
Yay. Should we talk about Red Bull for a little bit first?
Oh, God. Roman Reigns wins another title? No. But Red Bull dominated on the day. Sergio Perez came from the back of the grid after qualifying mishap to finish in 5th. And, of course, Max Verstappen won. We talked about it earlier in this year, but Cam, now that you've seen the first 3 races, do you feel more or less certain Red Bull can win every race this season.
Ooh. It's weird to think that I picked them to win 18 races on the year, and I may have lowballed it. I think we all may have lowballed it. Also, Alonso, on our preseason prediction, has already hit his quota of podiums. Well done.
Over, baby!
3! 3 in a row!
You are not allowed to discuss this, Mr. Zero Podiums.
Fuck off. You're not wrong, but fuck off.
Here's the thing, Skip. It is going to need to take something big to stop Red Bull from running the table. Now, it has happened before. We can get into that later. But the sheer well of pace they can access at will is insurmountable. I mean, between the corner, it's faster than everyone everywhere at this point. I mean, Max dropped down to third on the start. Do you realize how dominant a car has to be? That Max was conservative on the first lap. It's just like, yeah, pass me. I'll just get you later.
Yeah, he backed out of it.
He actually put himself in danger a little bit, Dre, because he broke really conservatively for T3. Yeah. And Lewis gave him the old Hamilton squeeze off the track, which that was very cute that Max was complaining about being pushed off track.
Max Verstappen complaining about being pushed off track. It is snowing in hell. Ugh, holy shit.
Yeah, and Dre, would you like some numbers?
I love me some numbers. Spill.
Well, after the first red flag restart, Max Verstappen spent a lap and a half drilling Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton ran out of ERS. Would you like to know the speed differential when Max went by?
Go on.
Lewis Hamilton was doing 289 kilometers per hour.
That's pretty fast.
Verstappen was doing 325.
Ooh.
That's a 20 mile an hour difference, roughly.
He drove by him like it was Lewis's engine that failed.
Oh, God almighty.
They can strip more wing off the car without losing corner speed. They have the most effective DRS in the business. And Honda's ERS is completely busted in race trim. It's not something that really manifests in qualifying because you can charge your battery when you go for a fast lap. But what Honda's ERS can do is it can maintain that 160 horsepower buff for way longer than any other car. And Max just drove up behind him and just ran him out of ERS. So when he was going by, he didn't have a couple more horsepower. He had over 160 more horsepower. And that is just insurmountable. There's nothing you can do about that.
Nope. Undefendable.
Yeah, I mean, he drove by and all you could do is laugh, really.
I did. I literally did. But when Verstappen passed Hamilton, I was like, oh, come on. That car's a cheat code. I just laughed. I was like, wow, this is over. Forget it.
Yeah. And I mean, where I laughed is that Max had one big push lap in this race, which I think was about lap 12. He kicked the field's teeth in by 1.1 seconds on that lap.
It's just ridiculous. It's stupid.
I mean, he pulled a 10-second gap and went off later, which was very funny to watch. And he wasn't even pushing. He had a half a second whenever he wanted it that he could just dive into.
Yeah, it's like whenever he felt like it, boom, half a second. Take charge the battery, bang, another half second. Charge the battery for a bit, bang, another half second. It's just he was in complete control of that race. The timing screen won't show it because it will only obviously, even at the peak of the gap was only about 10 seconds. But just the amount of control and manipulation. Hamilton had to drive hard because Fernando Alonso was behind him the whole way, like a bad rash. And Verstappen just could set purple laps whenever he wanted. It was just complete control and dominance. It's going to take something very special to beat these guys on merit. And I don't think it will happen on merit this year because they're too good. And look, let's put it this way. Sergio Perez went from 20th to 5th on the day, and I was critical of his performance because it took him like 6 laps to get past Lando Norris. No, like,
Lando Norris, who is driving a fucking sled. By the way, McLaren, points. They're on the board.
I want a written apology on my letter for you doubting me that McLaren were not going to be as bad as thought, because they cashed in with the heist of the century this year. They're fifth in the World Constructors Championship.
They cashed in because half the field crashed.
And they didn't. So points to them.
Points to them. But I mean, where I laughed is that on the lap that Max went by Lewis, because Lewis was out of ERS and Max decided to flex a bit, at the end of the first sector of the next lap, and he passed Lewis going into sector 2, by the end of the first sector on the next lap, the gap was over 2 seconds.
It's just ridiculous.
And the thing is, there is no downside to that pace besides maybe a bit of reliability. As it turns out, the drive shaft failure in Jeddah was finger trouble. A screw came loose. It happens.
One of them things.
Yeah, finger trouble. A classic failure. But, I mean, we've been here before, Dre. On merit, they can win every race this year. They can win every race this year and not even push. But merit is only half the battle.
I mean,
we've
literally just watched the race where the race director literally pulled a red out of his arse to try and stop him from winning. Call it what it is. Call it what it is. You are not pulling a red for any other reason than trying to see somebody else win. Cool. Am I wrong here?
Which is exactly why that's the restart that Max aced.
Of course it was. Third time's a charm.
I just think half the cars on that grid had like a millimeter of clutch left by the end of a third standing restart.
Oh, yeah.
Red Bull and Honda and their drivers have to continue executing. Sergio Perez had an atrocious weekend.
Awful.
And he cited it as braking issues, but when Red Bull rebuilt the car, they couldn't find anything wrong with it. It reeked of trying too hard to me, because Max just had this almost an air of effortlessness about him where he could just generate the lap time however he wanted to.
So look at qualifying. He was struggling to get his tires up to speed, then out of nowhere, final run, bam, finds half a second. Can't touch him.
Yeah, half a second, and all of the Mercedes hype train, which we'll talk to that effect next section. That all came to nothing. But we've seen, I mean, ask the MP44. Weird shit happens in racing.
Yeah, you could get collected in an incident trying to lap Nigel Mansell's injury replacement. What's up, Jean-Louis Schlesser? How you doing?
But yeah, I mean, it's going to take something catastrophic to happen to both cars, driver inflicted, reliability or otherwise, because Perez on a normal weekend will clean it up and he will win the race. Max, without reliability issues, could probably pass Sebastian Vettel on the all-times wins list by the end of this year. That shouldn't be possible given where he is right now.
He'll tie Ayrton Senna at Monaco.
We could see Max Verstappen realistically with 50 plus wins as a 3-time world champion by November.
What the fuck?
Before his 27th birthday.
It's not the fact that I think they will. It's the possibility that they could run the table, which terrifies me so.
Yeah, it's on. It's feasible. On merit, they will not be beaten this season unless something major goes wrong.
Yeah.
Put a pin in this in case they suffer like a double DNF at Baku or something.
Sure.
Yeah, it's going to take a double DNF. That's where I'm looking at it.
Sergio Perez's best track. Okay.
Yeah, the track where they just... The track where last year was arguably the death knell of Ferrari season. Hi, Ferrari.
The only man with multiple podiums in Baku, Sergio Perez.
That is a weird statistic.
I know. I think Perez has got 3 of them. But yeah,
he's the Street Fighter.
He is the Street Fighter. Let's get into the next section here. And Fernando Alonso took some time out of his busy schedule of shit-eating grins to take another thinly... I said that a bit too well, didn't I?
Line delivery, 100.
Oh, thank you, sir. To take another thinly veiled jab at his nemesis Mercedes during the race. He said, quote, if you read their comments, it seems they have a car that's out of Q3, but I don't think it's that bad. And I love that he said that with Carlos Sainz stood right next to him, and Sainz was like, yeah, I agree. He said, I have nothing to add, but I agree. Which I thought was just hilarious. Does he have a point? Because Lewis Hamilton did finish this race second on merit in Australia, no problem. Drove really well for what it's worth. Had a great day for Lewis. He was able to hold Alonso off, who arguably is in a quicker car. Alonso,
I would not say arguably at this point.
I actually would. Well, we'll get into it.
But
you heard it here first. Cam Buckley, Mercedes promoter.
Shut your filthy mouth.
I'll do, you dirty boy. My general vibe on this is that, look, to be fair to Mercedes, they never said their car wasn't good enough to make Q3. Like Alonso is kind of exaggerating a little bit here, right? Like,
yes, but Mercedes were acting like this was the proverbial end of the world.
I was about to say, and this is one of the few safe spaces I can say this on the internet, Mercedes are the most melodramatic, kumbaya motherfucking team I have ever seen on social media, and it is so goddamn cringe. It makes my eyeballs curl up into my skull sometimes. So they are the definition of the world's smallest violin. You play for them whenever they're struggling, because they are so quick to go with the win together, we lose together, kumbaya, my lord. That's
what happens when you play to that fan base. And it's what happens when they were just beating that ass in 2019 and 2020. They would be the first ones to put their hands up after beating the field by 30 seconds. Oh no, we had a ton of problems that race. Our car was like, the data was saying we were the third fastest team on merit. We don't know how we won, which really isn't promoting your product very well if you're Mercedes-Benz.
No.
And I think that a lot of people who don't drink the unpainted Kool-Aid really don't feel a lot of empathy for them now that they do have genuine problems with the car and they are no longer capable of winning a race on merit, because they're not.
No.
I mean, this weekend was better. I think there are reasons for that. I think this track helps their tire wear a bit, because I think that's a genuine X factor that Aston has over them. This track somewhat neutralized that.
It's a very smooth track. Mercs like it when it's smoother.
much smoother. They can run the car a little bit lower. Their concept, as we've spoken at length on the show, likes to be run as low as possible.
Yep.
When they can.
Massively.
But it doesn't feel like they took any real step forward towards the front. It feels more like this track neutralized Aston a bit with that tire wear and the fact that the Aston is a very draggy car. It makes great corner speed. It's very easy to drive. It's very kind on its tires. But it pays that due in efficiency. It is not an aero efficient car.
Yeah, they will lose in a 10th.5 in Sector 2, which is basically just two corners.
The sector of Alex Albon before he threw it into the corner backwards.
Purples, Alex Albon, purple Sector 2s all day long. Rack them up. I think there's a lot. There is nothing that screams Mercedes to me more than going, this is one of our worst days in racing, to, oh my God, look at the optimism in our camp in the space of a month. And 2 races. It's just so melodramatic, and it makes me laugh sometimes how just tone deaf Mercedes can be when they're moaning about how bad their car is. When it's like, oh yeah, we're terrible. Oh, and then Lewis Hamilton, the man has won 103. Yeah, Lewis Hamilton, the man has won 103 Grand Prix in his life, is beating his chest and going nuts over finishing second in a race he got his arse whipped by Max Verstappen until the standing restart bullshit started. It's hilarious.
Ain't nobody likes a winner while they're winning, but I'll tell you this. Y'all hear the Toto Wolff's gonna fight Zach Brown?
Bet the neighborhood on Toto Wolff.
That's the man who the discerning housewives love Total Wolf.
Troy Hawk, the man who, like, that was the most creative way I've ever heard someone just say to another man, "Daddy," than that right there. That was beautifully
Stop
done.
making me laugh. It hurts. I had surgery last week.
Surgery on a Buckley?
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, like, if you have not seen that video on F1's YouTube channel, do go out of your way. See, it is very funny. This describing Pierre Gasly as a creative explosion of cream is
Hey, yo.
Is that how we're describing him flying into the wall at turn 2?
Depends on who you ask.
Can you make cream of carbon fiber? Is that a soup?
I don't know. We'll try that out in the recipe. We'll see it on next year's version of MasterChef. You know what?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see it later on this year's version of Bake Off.
Oh my god! But
Is
yeah,
this the
like
next arena that Total Wolf and Zach Brown are going to fight in? I can't believe we're doing F1 team boss celebrity boxing. Winner takes on Gunther Steiner.
NASCAR commentary legend, apparently. But yeah, I mean, if you're Ferrari, you wish you had the problems Mercedes did right now.
Yeah, we didn't even mention it in the script. We've got to mention them briefly here. Like I said, worst start to a season for them since we changed the scoring system in 2010. Charles Leclerc slightly in fault for a lap 1 incident. Can't be too harsh on him for that one.
Just bounced himself out into the gravel and got beached there. Carlos Sainz, we already talked about him.
Yeah, drove well until that, which was a real shame. I think he actually was going quite well and was doing well to stay with Alonso and Hamilton for the most part until the restart. And then, like I said, Gwyneth Paltrow to the side pod. That was a shame.
Yeah.
Carlos was looking good for a podium until that point.
Yeah, and I think, again, I think the fight between Aston and Mercedes is going to ebb and flow a bit between maybe faster, more flowing tracks that might suit the Mercedes a little bit better, and the more technical stuff, which I think the Aston will suit really. I think the Aston's going to be phenomenal at places like Monaco and Hungary, Spain especially, given the tire wear there. I think Aston's going to be a pretty unassailable second place. But that image of Max driving by Lewis, that is the gap that Mercedes has to deal with. That is not surmountable under these regulations right now.
That's
not this year.
Gap.
That's everyone's gap.
100%. The struggle is real. Right, because it was also a bit of a chaos race at the end, and we had a bit of a jumbled order in certain places down the field. Who was your underdog hero of the day in this chaotic Australian Grand Prix?
Are we gonna all have like the same
You're
answer?
goddamn right we are, RJ.
Yuki fucking Tsunoda.
Dude, you know what is really sad about this is, like, Yuki's not scoring points. Well, he just scored his first point of the season through all of his Herculean efforts. He has 1 point to show for being the team leader at AlphaTauri. But the expectation was he needs to be scoring points on the regular. Well, never mind the fact that AlphaTauri's car is kind of terrible right now.
It's kind of the worst one in the field.
Probably.
Yeah, it might actually be. You know, like I said, McLaren racing common success and all. Back to Yuki Tsunoda, though. He could do all this stuff and it still may not matter because the top driver in Formula 2 right now is his ready-made successor in Ayumu Iwasa.
That boy nice.
That boy nice.
And I'll tell you what, yes, Red Bull and Honda are going to be divorcing, but, like, you got to promote the hottest hand out of F2 if he wins the title, right?
Surely.
Well, the thing is, you could do that, but there's another AlphaTauri driver that you could ditch to do that, because it wasn't just that Yuki got his first point on the board, and with his 11th places, he actually breaks the tiebreaker between them and Williams, which could be very important.
That is
given
useful.
how horrible the AlphaTauri is.
And it could have been so much more, too. Before they rolled back the results, Yuki Tsunoda was 5th, and he would have been 4th after the sides penalty.
My dude was one position off a podium before all that went down.
That is the driver that I've been wanting to see, and he needs a better car around him.
But the thing is, right, he destroyed his new floor, which is supposedly worth 1/4 of a second a lap in Friday practice.
Mm-hmm.
He was beating Nyck De Vries' ass to the tune of nearly half a second a lap without the new floor. Nyck had the new floor.
Yeah, and he liked it too.
He said it was a big improvement.
He ain't starting well for Nyck De Vries.
Nyck De Vries has been extra struggle-licious, but Yuki Tsunoda, I mean, earlier in that race, leveraging that mighty Honda ERS, dude there was a Tsunoda train because nothing could pass him in a straight line, but he was so slow in the corners.
I was watching that like, hold, Yuki, hold!
This is what happens when you put all of your attack stats in, and you put them all into defense instead.
He's like Drasil from the Beyblade series. I'm just gonna build my entire shit around defense. Oh dear.
No one, to my opinion, has deserved a point more than him this year.
100%.
And it basically doesn't even matter because McLaren got both cars in the points through the chaos.
They got 12 points. 12!
They got 12 points. They leapt up to 5th in the constructors' standings. McLaren racing common success.
They're only one position behind Ferrari in the... Wait, what do you mean Ferrari's having their worst year in over a decade?
Oh, someone save Fred Vassar. Save him. He doesn't deserve this.
Charles Leclerc, he has got to just be in his room screaming primordially.
He is literally on the bed, like next to his bed, on the floor, in the fetal position, rocking up, in like back and forth, saying, "Mama's little baby love, shortening." Like my man is going through it.
I mean, McLaren jumped Alpine with that because obviously both Alpines ended up strewn across the Australian countryside. And they, despite Hülkenberg getting points, they jumped Haas as well. Given the fight we've talked about for anyone getting into the points, McLaren might have just BS'd their way into a half-decent constructors result with the 9th worst car, with like the second to worst car on the entire grid.
Oscar Piastri's first ever single-seater race in his home country, and he gets 8th. Like, huge dub. Like, Lando Norris was 6th in the end. Imagine if you're Nico Hülkenberg and the Haas team. Hülkenberg drove brilliantly this race, by the way. Like, 7th place on the day. Like, it was desperately trying to hold off Lando Norris and couldn't do it at the end of the race. But 7th, imagine that. You've brought home 6 points for Haas. Brilliant result to get back to the garage with. And you're in a McLaren sandwich and they've brought home 12. So what's the point? Why are we even here? Fuck this.
Saying nothing of Alfa Romeo because Valtteri Bottas looked cooked this weekend.
A bad weekend for the Australian hero.
He was cheeks, and at least Zhou got in the points. Like, Zhou got 2 points for 9th, and it just didn't matter.
And that car is cheeks.
Ugh.
I'm worried that Zhou Guanyu is going to have what happened to Antonio Giovinazzi happen to him. It's like he gets better, but the car gets worse, and they just don't want to keep him anymore.
And then Porsche nicks his seat.
If I'm Sauber, I'm like, Bottas has had 2 really rough weekends, or even factoring in the floor damage in Jeddah. He's been amazing first race in Bahrain, and then just mega cheeks the next 2 races.
Right.
Alfa Romeo, low key, really not that good right now.
No, I mean, Andreas Seidel has basically put the feeler out to Audi of, please invest in us. We need people.
Yeah, I got that from mates in the Slack who work for our sister site that, Seidel's apparently gone to the back and like, we need more money. Like, we need money now to Audi because we are struggling. He said straight up, allegedly, that the team is not big enough to be a contending team. So Alfa Romeo is going through it right now. And yeah, the bar fight at the back of the field will continue. And McLaren went and got the chair. That's a big 12 points for McLaren to take for the advantage of Alpine's failure. So this race, I can't say it was dreadful. I can't even say it was bad, but I'm not sure how many times the sport's going to keep getting away with that one. We'll be back Formula One in a month's time because they're taking 3 weeks off. They'll be back on April 30th in Baku. And it's a sprint weekend, so good luck with that one. Yeah.
The race finished like this, and the next racing action we get to see in Formula One is the Baku sprint.
God help.
Let's go.
And in the words of Ceres Victoria from Helsing Ultimate Abridged, God save the Queen. Because that is going to be rough. We got 2 more episodes coming out in the next week or so, because next up will be MotoGP in Argentina. Because if you're a fan of the Happy Mondays, it's time for Bez. Like Marco Bezzecchi, MotoGP championship leader. Who would have guessed that back in February after 2 rounds? Anyone?
I just look at Pecco Bagnaia and I just ask, why are you like this?
Why?
Why are you the way that you are?
I look at these results and I think this is all part of the VR46 master plan.
It's all coming up Millhouse, Ferruccio and the boys. More on that later this week. And then we got IndyCar as well for the 375 at Texas. And what a race that was. My word. Joseph Newgarden and Alex Palou and Pato Award beating the ever-loving shit out of each other. Good stuff. Good racing. We love to see. In Texas, we had a great race in Texas. That in itself is worth talking about. We're going to gush over that later this week. So yeah, plenty of great content to keep you busy for the next week or so. Places where you can find us one more time. Twitter, motorsport_101, at Dre_WTF1, at CBuckley917, at RJ O'Connell. Website, Motorsport 101. Bonus thoughts from all 3 races this weekend will be on there by the time this goes out. Also, again, patreon.com/motorsport 101. Back us there for early access to shows. And as well as supporters club of our Discord server. That will be fun indeed. I said we'll be back for MotoGP real soon. Until then, I've been Dre Harrison. They've been Cam Buckley and RJ O'Connell. Thank you very much for listening. See ya. Sayonara.
Later, y'all.
I don't need green, white checkers in my Formula One.
But do you need Ross Chastain turning someone?
No, he already did that to Schumacher and Damon Hill in '94.
God damn it.